What makes this company great? The company today is Sony. Is this a financially world-class company? Is your company a financially world-class company? There's nothing more satisfying than building a financially world-class company. Let's look at Sony. First, let's consider the revenue breakdown of the company across the world. First, 30% of revenue was generated from the US. Yes, and I have to bring this comment on the screen. Hold on. Frank says, "Happy 29th birthday." Yes, Frank, you are the man. 29 and 2/2. Also, 23% of revenue is coming from Japan, 19% from Europe, 14% from the rest of Asia Pacific, and 7% from China, and then others. What you see about many of these companies I'm looking at is they are global in reach. And if you want to build a huge, successful company, you have got to have products that go global. Do your products go global? Did you know that Sony not only produces electronics such as smartphones, but also movies under Sony Pictures and financial services where they actually make a lot of money? So who are Sony's top competitors? Panasonic, Apple, Samsung Electronic. Those are some examples. In fact, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to look at the net profit margins of Samsung and Apple relative to Sony. That will help us understand the profitability. So why is Sony so successful? Well, they've got a diversified product portfolio for sure. Sony's product range spans various sectors, including electronics, gaming, and entertainment. And on the topic of electronics, I remember when I got out of high school in 1983, and I went to work in a factory outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And I used to have to ride a little moped that I had to the factory every morning from my tiny little apartment in Kent, Ohio. And on that moped, it was funny because it was an hour ride, and I somehow installed a piece of wood on the back so I could lean back on this little moped with a tiny little engine. But I remember my best friend at that time, Dave Petro, had a Sony Walkman, and he let me borrow it. And I listened to music on that motorcycle in 1983, 1984, going to and from work for an hour both ways. And at that time, the main thing I can remember listening to was Rush. That's my little story of Sony in those days. And Sony Walkman was incredible innovation. So also a lot of research and development. Like other world-class companies, Sony has heavily invested in research and development to bring innovative products to the market consistently. And then, of course, a strong brand identity, known for its quality, reliability, and cutting-edge technology. But does that make it financially world-class? We're going to see in just a bit. So let's look at Sony's revenue by segment as of 2022. First is game and network services. We're talking about $26 billion. Second is electronic products like headsets and the like. And third is financial services, which is whole life and automobile insurance. Is generating $10 billion in revenue. And what are the best-selling game consoles that Sony sells? Let's look at the total units sold. First, number one, PlayStation 2, 155 million devices or units sold. And PlayStation 4, 117 million. And PlayStation 1, 103 million. Now, I have to confess that I've never used any of these because I generally didn't have a TV most of my life. And I only have a TV now simply because mom, likes to watch Netflix and other stuff. But it's incredible volumes that they're doing with these. Now, this is interesting. One of the things that Sony's trying to do is always be innovative. And here we can see that Sony is trying to basically make the best noise canceling earbuds, not over the ear, but buds in the world. And when I was working on this, I went and listened to a review on YouTube from a guy that was about a 10-minute review of his experience. And he vouches for them that they are pretty amazing noise canceling earbuds. I think they're actually coming out over the next month or two, but he had a pre-release copy to, play with. So let's look at Sony's competitive advantage to understand a little bit more. First, it was founded in 1946. It's in the infotech sector, or also sometimes in the consumer discretionary sector, because these units are consumer discretionary things that we buy. 111,000 employees, $83 billion in revenue. And PlayStation, Sony Pictures Entertainment, and Sony Music are some of the main segments or brands. So what is its competitive advantage? Competitive advantage through product differentiation, or diversification, strong brand recognition, and technological innovation. For sure, these are the things that have set Sony apart. So how was it achieved? Well, by developing consumer electronics, gaming consoles, entertainment content, and expanding into multiple sectors, leveraging synergy between divisions. I would say that Sony has done a great job over the years. But is the company financially world-class? Here's the method I use as an investor and business owner to measure whether a company has a competitive advantage. The world-class benchmarking scorecard that we developed about 10 years ago. And here's how we construct that scorecard for any company. So we gather the yearly and quarterly financial data of 26,000 companies worldwide. And then we calculate each company's profitable growth score. That's a composite measure of both profitability and growth. After that, we rank the subject company relative to sector peers of a similar size. That's a decile ranking from 1 being best to 10 being worst. A score of 1 or 2 is financially world-class. And then we assess the company's performance over the prior 4 years and the past 12 months. And now you're telling me, come on, Andrew, tell me, is Sony financially world-class? Let's look at it. In fact, what we can see is that Sony is not financially world-class. Unfortunately, Sony has a ranking of about 6. It went down to 8 in 2020. It came back up to 4, but in 2022, it's at 7, and past 12 months, it's at 7. This is bad news. Although they have many competitive advantages, they have core competencies, competitive advantage must be resulting in superior performance. And therefore, my answer to the question is Sony does not have competitive advantage. I told you that we would be looking at the net profit margins a bit. So let's look at Samsung first, and just pay attention to this net profit margin, which is at 14% in 2021 and 18% in 2022. Let's compare that to Apple. And here we can see Apple is crazy at almost 32% net profit margin. That's unheard of, particularly for a massive company. So where does Sony rank? Well, the first thing that you're going to see is that Sony is in, numbers are in yen, billions of yen. And in fact, it's difficult to compare yen versus dollars in this table, but that's not the case if we're just looking at it on a margin basis. And we can see that the margin is about 8 to 9%. That already is above average margin of global companies of about 6%, but it's far away from where Samsung or Apple's at. So that gives you a wrap on Sony and what's going on there. So let me finish by asking you, is your company financially world-class? Do you lead a company with $15 million or more in revenue? If so, just message me and I'll score your company, of course, confidentially. Have a great day and thanks for listening.